The door slammed shut with a deafening finality, and I heard the deadbolt click into place. I was 17, and my own father had just locked me in the basement like I was some kind of criminal. No warning, no discussion, just punishment. 3 full days, no food, no light, no explanation anyone else would ever believe. He told everyone I was out of town with friends. My mother nodded along like it was the truth. But in reality, I was in a freezing concrete basement beneath our spotless white house in suburban Idaho, shivering, starving, and wondering if I would ever get out. Why? Because I dared to apply to a journalism program in New York without their approval. Because I forged a signature to chase a future they didn't choose. If you're watching this while sipping coffee in a warm living room, consider yourself lucky. Because what I went through wasn't just control. It wasn't just discipline. It was imprisonment. And I'm telling you now because someone else out there needs to hear it. The people who claim to love you aren't always the ones who keep you safe. My name is Charlotte, and for the first 16 years of my life, I believed discipline was love. My dad, Henry, was a retired Marine-turned-factory manager who treated our family like a battalion. Our home in a tidy suburb of Boise was spotless, silent, and suffocating. He didn't yell, he commanded. He didn't guide, he enforced. My mother, Evelyn, was the softer half of the equation, but never the opposing force. She followed his lead in everything, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. From the outside, we were the perfect American family. Our lawn was trimmed, our flag flown proudly, and our windows sparkled. But behind the doors of that 2-story colonial, my life was dictated by a rigid code. There were curfews down to the minute, conversations limited to safe topics like weather and chores, no social media, no phone after 9 p.m., no friends without background checks, and absolutely no deviation from the path they had chosen for me: community college, local job, stay close, stay quiet. But I was never wired to be quiet. My escape came in the form of a battered old Nikon camera my grandfather left behind after he passed. I found it tucked in a box of his things in the attic one summer afternoon. It smelled like cedar and dust and possibility. When I showed it to my mother, she smiled softly and said I could keep it as long as I didn't let it distract from my studies. My father rolled his eyes and muttered something about hobbies being for people with too much free time. That camera changed everything. Through its lens, I discovered a way to observe without being seen, to capture beauty that no one else noticed, to create something entirely mine. I started taking it to school, snapping photos of leaves clinging to their last color, in the fall of classmates' mid-laughter of sunsets, burning behind the cafeteria roof. When I joined the school newspaper, my photos finally had a purpose. I became the staff photographer, and then by junior year, the photography editor. It was during a lunch meeting with Mrs. Hastings, our advisor, that I first heard about the National Youth Journalism Intensive in Manhattan. A 2-week program hosted by actual reporters and editors from across the country. Field assignments, guest lectures, multimedia storytelling workshops. It was everything I dreamed of. And when she said she'd already nominated me based on my portfolio, I felt like the world cracked open just a little. But reality slammed it shut. I knew instantly my parents would never allow it. 2 weeks in New York, unsupervised with strangers. It might as well have been asking to live on Mars. Still, I brought it up over dinner that night, cautiously optimistic. I was nominated for a journalism summer program, I said, twirling spaghetti nervously on my fork. It's in Manhattan. Only 30 students nationwide get in. Henry looked up from his plate. New York. I nodded. Absolutely not. No questions, no curiosity, just a flat wall of denial. Evelyn didn't even look at me. She just kept cutting her salad into perfect anxious squares. I'd be supervised. It's on the Columbia campus, fully chaperoned. Henry set down his fork. You're not going. End of discussion. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand an explanation. But I'd learned long ago those reactions only tightened the leash. So I did the unthinkable. I waited until school the next day, scanned an old permission form my mother had signed for a choir field trip, and carefully edited it in the computer lab. I uploaded it along with my application, using the money I'd been hiding in a hollowed-out copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. To cover the fee, I felt guilty, yes. But more than that, I felt alive. 2 weeks later, I received the acceptance packet. I stared at the Columbia logo, the welcome letter, the campus map, and I cried in the girls' bathroom for 10 full minutes. Not out of fear, out of joy. I had made it. I had earned it. My work, my risk, my future. Jasmine, my best friend since 3rd grade, squealed when she found out. "You have to go," she whispered, eyes wide. "Even if they don't let you." That's when the plan was born. Jasmine's family took a trip to Michigan every summer. We'd say I was going with them. Her parents agreed to drop me at the bus station instead, no questions asked. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. The envelope came on a Saturday. I was in the kitchen baking muffins with Evelyn when the mail slot clattered. I saw the oversized envelope hit the floor and froze. "I'll grab it," I said, wiping flour from my hands. Too late. Henry picked it up before I could reach it. He turned it over in his hands, then read the bold lettering. Columbia University. My stomach dropped. It's nothing I said too quickly, just some college info. "Then you won't mind if I open it." He didn't wait for a response. He tore the envelope open and started pulling out pages. The itinerary, the acceptance letter, the permission form with my mother's forged signature. I felt the blood drain from my face as he read silently, his expression hardening like cement. "Charlotte," he said, voice low and dangerous. "What have you done?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words tangled in panic. "You forged your mother's signature." Evelyn walked into the room just as his voice began to rise. She took one look at the documents on the table and froze. "She lied to us," Henry said. "Plotted to sneak out. Committed forgery." I didn't sneak out, I choked. I wanted to go. I knew you'd say no. "You're damn right we would have said no," he exploded. "And now you think you're entitled to defy us, to break our trust." "She's just a teenager," Evelyn murmured, reaching for his arm. "We should talk about this." But he pulled away. "No, enough talking. She wants independence. Let's see how she handles it." He grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise and started dragging me toward the basement door. "Henry," my mother cried. "Don't interfere," he snapped. "This is long overdue." I kicked, screamed, pleaded. Nothing mattered. He threw open the basement door, shoved me down the steps, and slammed it behind me. Then, the click of the deadbolt. Silence. It was dark, cold, damp. I couldn't breathe. I ran to the stairs and pounded on the door, screaming for my mother. I begged. I sobbed. But no one came, only silence. That's when I realized this wasn't just punishment. This was prison. The first few hours were the worst, not because of the cold or the hunger, or even the terrifying realization that I was utterly alone. It was the disbelief, the staggering, crushing disbelief that my own father had locked me in a basement like I was nothing more than a mistake to be corrected. I sat on the bottom step, staring up at the wooden door, willing it to open. Any moment now, I thought. He'd come back. He'd realize he'd gone too far. He'd feel ashamed, regretful, human. But the door stayed shut, and then the light switch stopped working. I hadn't noticed until dusk began to fall, and I reached for the only switch near the staircase. I flicked it. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. He'd cut the power. It was no longer just punishment. This was calculated, controlled, cruel. I fumbled in the dark, my hands trembling as I tried to orient myself in the blackness. The basement was unfinished concrete floor, exposed beam storage boxes stacked like barricades, and my dad's immaculate workbench along the far wall. The only source of natural light was a narrow window well high up, and barely large enough for a raccoon to crawl through. I screamed again. My voice cracked and echoed off the cold walls, sounding like someone else's cries. Then I sat curled into myself like a scared animal and waited. By morning, the thirst was worse than the hunger. I tried the old utility sink. Miraculously, water flowed rusty and metallic, but I drank like it was the nectar of gods. No food, no bathroom, no blanket. When the basement door finally opened, I was sitting on the cold floor, rocking gently, just to keep my mind from shattering. My father appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a single bottle of water. He didn't speak at first, just set it on the top step like he was feeding a feral dog. 3 days, he said flatly. 3 days in the dark will fix that attitude of yours. He turned to leave. Wait, I rasped. Fix me? Fix what? Wanting a life that's mine. He paused, just for a second, then closed the door, without another word. The sound of the lock sliding back into place felt like a slap. Hours dragged. I used boxes to create a makeshift seat. I dug through old camping gear and found a dying lantern with barely enough juice to light a few feet ahead. That yellow flicker became my only comfort. I scribbled on scraps of paper from his workbench, anything to keep my mind focused. I wrote letters I might never send, notes to myself, a list of things I'd do once I got out, if I got out. And then, tucked deep in a box of my grandfather's things, I found it an old flip phone. My heart stopped. I pressed the power button dead. Frantically, I searched the box again. A cord. I found the charger, and near the sink was an outlet installed by my father years ago for his power tools. I plugged it in. The screen blinked weakly to life. 1 bar, no signal. My stomach sank until I remembered something Jasmine had once told me. Most phones can still send texts over Wi-Fi, even without service. I navigated to the settings. The house Wi-Fi was there, still using the default name and password. I connected. And then I sent the message that would change everything. Basement locked. 3 days. No food. Dad, help. I stared at the screen, watching the little spinning circle. Delivered. I had no idea if she'd see it or believe it. But it was out there. A sliver of hope. I shut the phone off to save power and huddled under an old tarp I'd found behind some storage bins. I rationed the water. I whispered my own name to remind myself I still existed. The second day, I heard shouting upstairs my mother's voice. I banged on the ceiling. Mom, I'm here. Please. Silence. That afternoon, voices I didn't recognize echoed faintly through the floorboards. Multiple people. I screamed until my throat was raw. No one came. Later, the door opened again. My father descended halfway, dropping another bottle of water and a crust of bread. Your friend and her mother stopped by, he said. We told them you were with classmates from the newspaper. I stared at him in disbelief. You lied. We're your parents, he said. Why wouldn't they believe us? The police came too. Your school counselor must have called when you missed class. I sat bolt upright. And you told them what? That you were being difficult, that you were out needing space. Teens rebel. People understand. They'll come back, I said quietly. Someone will figure it out. He didn't flinch. You're 17. No one questions parents. Then he turned, climbed the stairs, and locked the door behind him. I sat there for hours trying to stay warm, trying to stay sane. When the third day came, I could barely stand. The hunger had moved from pain to numbness. The light in the lantern died. I tried to remember how long it had been since I'd heard a human voice. And then I remembered the phone. With trembling fingers, I turned it back on. 1 bar of power left. I tapped into the message history. A reply. OMG, are you serious? We came by. Your mom said you were out. Are you really in the basement? I typed as fast as my fingers would allow. Yes. Police came, he lied, letting me out TMRW. Don't trust anything they say. I hit send as the phone died in my hands. I didn't know if it went through, but I knew someone out there finally believed me. That night, sleep didn't come. Just a slow unraveling of fear and hope, shame and rage. When I heard footsteps in the morning and the click of the deadbolt sliding back, I thought it was over. Then came the knock on the front door. Voices, firm, authoritative, unfamiliar, and then a name, Charlotte. It was a woman's voice, strong, clear, intentional. Is she home now? We need to speak with her. I crept up the stairs and peeked through the crack. 2 police officers stood at the front door. My father stood between them and the truth. She's fine, he said smoothly. Out with friends. She just came home. We'd like to see her, sir. He hesitated. That small pause was everything. Then he turned toward me, sensing my presence. Charlotte, come down. And for the first time in 3 days, I did. I descended those stairs not like a victim, but like someone who had nothing left to hide. Not even fear. The moment I stepped into the entryway, everything felt surreal. The house hadn't changed, the floors still gleamed, the scent of lemon cleaner lingered in the air, and the morning sun lit the living room just like always. But nothing felt the same. Not after the basement, not after 3 days of isolation and lies. The officers stood just beyond the threshold. Officer Martinez was calm, her gaze steady. Officer Blake, a younger man, gave me a slight nod. Neither smiled. Neither offered false comfort. Charlotte Wright Martinez asked, "We'd like to speak with you privately if that's okay." Before I could answer, my father stepped forward. "Anything you need to ask her can be done in our presence. She's a minor." Blake's voice was firmer than I expected. "Actually, sir, we'd prefer to speak with her alone. It's standard in cases involving possible abuse." My father stiffened. "This is a parenting issue, not abuse. Then there shouldn't be any problem with us talking to your daughter in private." Martinez said, not backing down. I looked over at my mother. She was standing by the sink, arms wrapped tightly around herself, her gaze fixed on the floor. Not once had she met my eyes. Martinez turned to me again. "Charlotte, would you like to speak with us alone?" I nodded. Blake led me toward the dining room while Martinez gently closed the door behind her. I felt my father's stare drilling into my back, the weight of years of obedience pressing against my shoulders. But I didn't stop. Not this time. We sat at the table. Martinez turned on a small recorder. "We just want to hear your side," she said softly. "Whatever you're comfortable sharing." I didn't start with anger. I didn't start with accusation. I started with the truth. I applied to a journalism program at Columbia. I knew my parents wouldn't approve, so I forged a permission form. My dad found out and locked me in the basement. "How long were you in the basement?" Blake asked. 3 days. No food. 1 bottle of water per day. Any access to a bathroom? There's an old utility sink. That's it. Did you try to get out? There's a padlock on the exterior basement door. The windows are too small. The door at the top of the stairs locks from the outside. They looked at each other. Martinez asked gently, "How did you manage to contact someone?" I told them everything, the flip phone, the Wi-Fi, the desperate message to Jasmine. I even mentioned the old camera I'd left in my room months ago for a school project, one that auto-uploaded to a shared cloud. I hadn't thought about it until that moment. Jasmine might have remembered, I added. She helped me set it up. We used it for editing assignments together. Martinez paused. "We've actually received a video file this morning. It appears to confirm what you're saying." My breath caught. "You've seen it," she nodded. "It shows your father forcibly taking you down the stairs. Audio picks up part of the argument. It's strong evidence. The shift in power was almost imperceptible, but it was there. I wasn't just a teenager with a story. I was a witness, a survivor, and I had proof. They asked a few more questions, details I'd pushed deep down to survive. The sounds, the cold, the silence, my trembling hands, the hunger so deep I felt hollow. When they finished, Blake stood. "We need to search the basement. Will you come with us?" I hesitated. My chest tightened. Going back down there felt impossible. Martinez read my hesitation and gently placed her hand on the table. "You don't have to, Charlotte. We can go without you." I swallowed hard. "No, I'll go." The three of us returned to the front hall. My father stood rigid near the staircase, jaw clenched, arms folded. My mother, she was still by the sink, still silent, still small. "We're going to check the basement." Martinez said, her voice cool. My father protested. "You don't have a warrant. This is still our home." Blake pulled out a phone. "The video we received grants us probable cause. We're proceeding." My father blanched. For the first time, I saw something I never thought I'd see in his eyes, fear. We descended the stairs. It looked exactly the same. The tarp I'd used to sleep still lay in a pile. Empty bottles sat in a corner. The air was still damp, still sour with neglect. My notes still scattered the workbench. "Jesus," Blake muttered under his breath. They took photos. Martinez tested the light switch. Nothing. Blake examined the deadbolt, the padlock, the window. This wasn't discipline, he said finally. This was confinement. I didn't cry. Not then. I felt hollow, like I was watching someone else's story unfold. Back upstairs, my father was pacing. "We need to bring you both to the station," Martinez said. "Pending further investigation." "You're arresting us," my mother whispered. "Based on the evidence, there are potential charges of child endangerment, unlawful imprisonment, and abuse," Blake said. My father looked at me, pure venom in his stare. "You did this." Martinez stepped between us. "Sir, don't speak to her again." They escorted my parents outside. I stayed in the doorway watching as my neighbors slowly emerged from their homes, drawn by the flashing lights. Mr. Allen from next door stared with his mouth open. Mrs. Jennings clutched her dog's leash like it was a lifeline. The perfect facade was gone. And then I saw her, Jasmine, standing by the curb with her mom. The moment our eyes met, she ran toward me, throwing her arms around me so fast, I nearly fell backward. I knew something was wrong. She said, tears in her voice. "When your mom said you were out, I knew it was a lie." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Her mom approached more slowly, her expression. "Stricken? Charlotte." We had no idea. "You weren't supposed to," I said softly. They never let anyone close enough. That evening, a police officer named Melanie drove me to the hospital for evaluation. I was dehydrated, underweight, and had early signs of malnutrition. They admitted me overnight. IV fluids, blood work. A social worker named Stephanie met with me, kind but cautious. "Do you have any relatives nearby?" she asked. "No one. They didn't cut off." She nodded slowly. "Would you feel comfortable staying with a friend's family temporarily?" I looked at her. "Yes." "The Taylors." She smiled. "They've already offered." The relief that washed over me was so intense, I nearly sobbed. That night, as I lay in a hospital bed under fluorescent lights, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I could. For the first time in days, I was safe. The Taylor home wasn't grand or flashy. It didn't have a perfectly manicured lawn or custom shutters. The carpets were a little worn, the kitchen had hand-painted tiles, and the front door stuck slightly when you opened it. But the moment I stepped inside, it felt like stepping into a different planet, one where breathing came easier. Mrs. Taylor showed me to the guest room. Fresh linens, a spare toothbrush, folded pajamas borrowed from Jasmine. "I hope this is okay," she said softly. "It's perfect," I whispered, and I meant it. For the first few days, I slept more than I talked. My body needed healing, but so did something deeper, something that had been worn thin by years of fear. I woke in the middle of the night more than once, heart pounding, unsure where I was. But each time I opened the door, there were no locks. No silence pressed down on me. Just the quiet sounds of a normal home. A ticking clock. A refrigerator hum. Wind through the trees. Jasmine stayed close, never smothering, just present. She let me take the lead. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we just watched old movies in silence. She didn't ask for answers. She gave me space to find them on my own. Mrs. Taylor became a constant presence, gentle, firm, and never intrusive. She never asked what had happened, but she made sure I had everything I needed. She helped me navigate the chaos of doctor appointments, court proceedings, and therapy referrals. Mr. Taylor, a quiet man, with a kind face, cooked dinner most nights. And every evening they invited me to join, never forced, just invited. One night over lasagna, Mr. Taylor said, "We called the school. They're ready whenever you are. No pressure. You decide when you go back." I nodded, overwhelmed by the simple kindness. "I think I'd like to go next week," I said. He smiled gently. "We'll get you a new backpack then." It felt surreal, this idea of normalcy, of rejoining the world, as if I hadn't just survived something unthinkable. But I wanted it. The day before I returned to school, Mrs. Taylor drove me to get a new phone. It felt strange holding it like freedom in the palm of my hand. The first person I messaged was Mrs. Hastings, my journalism advisor. "I'm okay. Back next week. Can't wait to see the newsroom again." She replied within minutes. "I kept your desk. The team misses you. You're not just coming back, you're coming home." Those words made me cry harder than anything else had. Returning to school was awkward. The halls were loud, the stairs inevitable. Some students whispered. Some avoided eye contact altogether, but others surprised me teachers who offered quiet support, friends who slid notes of encouragement into my locker. And then there was the newspaper staff. They greeted me like I'd never left. No questions, no awkwardness, just a welcome back and an open seat. When I walked into the clubroom, my camera already waiting on the table, it felt like reclaiming a part of myself I thought I'd lost. Mrs. Hastings pulled me aside during lunch. I spoke with Columbia. She said, eyes twinkling, "We can resubmit your application for next summer." I blinked. They'd still accept me. "They never rescinded it," she replied. I told them what happened. "They offered to hold your spot if you're still interested." Still interested. It was all I had ever wanted. "Yes," I whispered. "Please, yes." Outside the newsroom, things continued to evolve. My parents had been formally charged, my father with child abuse and false imprisonment, my mother with neglect and aiding unlawful confinement. The evidence was strong. The footage, my testimony, the reports from the hospital, all painted a picture of a home ruled by fear. Their attorneys tried to minimize it, called it extreme discipline, claimed it was an overreaction to teenage defiance. But the court didn't buy it. My father received 4 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2. Mandatory counseling, parenting classes, anger management. He didn't look at me once during the sentencing. My mother's case was more complicated. She claimed she had been manipulated, threatened, too afraid to intervene. There was truth in it. I had seen her flinch under his voice more than once. But she had also played her role. She had lied to the police, told Jasmine's mother I was with friends, watched silently as the basement door locked behind me. The judge sentenced her to 5 years probation with required therapy and no contact unless approved by my therapist and the court. She moved to California to stay with her sister. She wrote me letters. I didn't open them. Maybe one day, but not now. My court-appointed therapist, Dr. Grayson, met with me twice a week. At first, I hated it. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to think. But she was patient, kind, unflinching. She helped me see what I hadn't allowed myself to before, that my home hadn't just been strict, it had been unsafe. That rules wrapped in fear weren't structure, they were control. You're allowed to be angry, she told me one day, and you're allowed to grieve even if what you lost wasn't good for you. I held on to that for weeks. One afternoon, while digging through an old SD card for my camera, I found a photo I'd taken a few weeks before the basement. It was of a protest we'd covered students holding signs outside the school board building. My photo had captured a girl mid-chant, her eyes alight with conviction, her mouth open mid-sentence. The caption I'd scribbled in the margin read, "Use your voice, even if it shakes." I stared at it for a long time, and then I started writing. I wrote a personal essay for the school newspaper. No names, no locations, just a story of survival and silence, of darkness and eventual light. I showed it to Mrs. Hastings before I submitted it. She read it without speaking, then looked at me. "You sure you want to share this?" I nodded. "I think someone needs to read it." It was published the next week. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from classmates, from students I'd never met, from alumni who had lived through their own secret hells. "You helped me name it," one student wrote. "I thought it was just me." Another wrote, "I didn't know anyone else grew up walking on eggshells." It was in those messages I saw the power of truth, not as a weapon, but as a lifeline. The essay led to an invitation from a local nonprofit supporting teens in crisis. They asked if I'd be willing to volunteer. Maybe speak, maybe take photos for a campaign. I said yes, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I finally understood that fear doesn't get to decide who we become. One day, Jasmine sat beside me on the porch swing at her house, our feet brushing the grass. "You're not the same," she said gently, "but in a good way. Stronger." I looked at her. "I'm still scared sometimes," she smiled. "Strong doesn't mean never scared. It means doing it anyway." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. My camera hung from my neck. I lifted it and snapped a picture of Jasmine, eyes bright, laughter caught mid-breath. It wasn't just a photo of a friend. It was a photo of light returning. 6 months after the basement, I stood in front of the mirror in the Taylor's guest bathroom, adjusting the collar of a blazer Mrs. Taylor had found for me at a thrift store. It fit a little awkwardly in the shoulders, but it felt right, like armor I had earned. The reflection that stared back wasn't the same girl who'd once tiptoed through her own home. My face had filled out again. The shadows under my eyes had faded. But more than anything, it was in my posture. Shoulders no longer hunched in defense, but lifted. Strong, present. I wasn't just healing, I was rebuilding. Living with the Taylors had given me something I never knew I needed: consistency. Each morning began with a knock on my door and a breakfast's ready from Mrs. Taylor. Dinner was at 6:30. Homework was expected. Curfews were enforced, but with explanation and conversation, not commands. I was treated like a person, not a threat. Jasmine and I grew closer in ways only survivors of storms do. She never made me retell the trauma, but she never pretended it hadn't happened either. She'd leave small notes in my backpack, quotes, affirmations, memes when I needed a laugh. We became each other's anchors. School remained both a challenge and a sanctuary. Some days I still caught people staring, whispering. But most days I found peace in the ordinary biology quizzes group. Projects the smell of old books in the library. Mrs. Hastings became more than an advisor. She became a mentor. She gave me harder assignments, encouraged me to pitch ideas for editorials, and always reminded me, "You don't have to tell the world everything at once. Start with what matters most." I clung to that. Dr. Grayson, my therapist, helped me untangle the web of guilt I hadn't even realized I carried. Guilt for betraying my parents. Guilt for being believed when so many others weren't. Guilt for surviving. They created the harm, she reminded me. You're not responsible for the consequences of their choices. In one session, I asked, is it normal to still miss the idea of family, even when they hurt me? She nodded. It's not family you miss. It's the version you should have had. That stayed with me. One Thursday afternoon in early spring, I was photographing a protest downtown students rallying for mental health funding. I snapped a picture of a young boy holding a cardboard sign that read, I deserve to be heard. His face was defiant, hopeful. I realized that photo wasn't just about him. It was about all of us who had been silenced. That night, I began outlining a new project, one that would feature stories of young people who had survived toxic homes. Not just trauma, but triumph, resilience. I pitched the idea to Mrs. Hastings. She didn't hesitate. Run with it. Over the next 2 months, I interviewed teens from shelter support groups and foster homes. Some were still in it. Some were out. All of them had fire in their voices. I didn't just take their portraits. I asked them what healing looked like, what freedom felt like, what they wanted others to know. The photos became part of a school exhibit, then a feature in the local paper, then an invitation to speak at a conference on youth advocacy. When I stepped onto that stage, my hands trembled, but my voice did not. I used to think silence was safer, I said to the room. Now I know silence protects the abuser, not the survivor. The applause didn't matter. What mattered were the students who came up afterward with tears in their eyes. Me too, they said. I thought I was the only one. Each time I hugged them and said, you're not. And you never were. Around that same time, my acceptance letter from Columbia arrived again, this time with no secrecy, no forged forms, no lies. Mrs. Taylor was beside me when I opened it. We'd be honored to drive you to New York ourselves, she said, tears in her eyes. Jasmine screamed so loud the neighbors came out to check on us. I laughed a real, full laugh. I hadn't heard from myself in years. On my 18th birthday, the Taylors hosted a small dinner, chocolate cake, streamers, a key wrapped in ribbon. To your forever home, Mr. Taylor said, placing the key in my hand. No matter how old you are or where you go, you'll always have a place here. I cried harder than I had in months, not from pain, from gratitude. Later that night, alone in my room, I pulled out the last unopened letter from my mother. It was short, rambling, regretful. I don't expect forgiveness. I was scared. I was weak. But I should have been your mother first. I didn't know what to do with that. Dr. Grayson had told me healing isn't linear, that I could both acknowledge her pain and still hold her accountable. I folded the letter back and placed it in a box with my old camera. Not forgotten, just not defining me anymore. One evening, Jasmine and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset. Do you think you'll ever go back? She asked. To the house. I shook my head. No, there's nothing there for me anymore. But if they ever changed, I thought for a long moment. I don't need them to change. I just needed to change what I believed I deserved. That night, I finalized the video project I'd been working on, documentary-style interviews, my narration woven throughout. It ended on a simple message. We are not what they did to us. We are what we choose to become next. When it premiered online, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of views, messages from strangers across the country, even international students who said I thought no one would ever understand. I didn't respond to every comment, but I read every one. Each message was a reminder my voice mattered. My truth had power. 1 week later, I was invited to speak at a national conference on youth mental health. Standing backstage, I wasn't scared I was ready. Because somewhere between that basement and this stage, I'd stopped surviving and started living. I used to believe survival was enough, that making it out was the finish line. But what I've come to understand is that survival is only the beginning. Freedom isn't just walking away from the house that hurt you. It's waking up each morning and choosing not to let the past dictate the future. It's standing in the mirror, recognizing your scars, and refusing to be ashamed of them. It's choosing who you become next. 6 months after the basement, a year after the Columbia acceptance, and a lifetime removed from who I once was, I found myself standing on the rooftop of a university dorm in New York City. Camera in hand, wind in my hair. The skyline stretched out in every direction like a painting I'd dreamed of my whole life. And I was there, not because someone allowed it, but because I had fought for it. The Columbia Summer Journalism Institute was everything I had hoped for and more. We met with editors from major publications. We conducted interviews in Central Park. We produced multimedia packages that were shared across school networks nationwide. But what struck me most wasn't the prestige. It was the people. Teenagers from every corner of the country. Different backgrounds, beliefs, experiences, yet all united by a passion for truth, for stories, for the power of words and images. During one evening session, we were asked to share why journalism mattered to us. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. For a long time, I said I didn't have a voice. And when I found it, I was punished for using it. So now I tell stories not just mine but others, because someone somewhere needs to know they're not alone. Journalism isn't just about reporting facts. It's about holding space for truth, even when that truth is hard to hear. The room was silent when I finished, but the kind of silence that listens. That night, one of the program instructors pulled me aside. "You're going to do more than take pictures, Charlotte," he said. "You're going to change lives." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just nodded and said I hope so. And I do. Because here's what they don't tell you about trauma. It doesn't vanish. It softens. It whispers instead of screams. But it never fully disappears. There are still moments when I wake up disoriented. Still days when I avoid dark, windowless rooms. Still scents that send my pulse racing before I even realize why. But now I have tools, I have people, I have purpose. The Taylors officially became my legal guardians until I turned 18. They celebrated that birthday with a homemade cake and a card that simply said, "You made it," and we're so proud. Jasmine and I applied to colleges together. We'll be roommates next fall, both majoring in journalism. We joke about covering different beats. She wants to do culture. I'm leaning investigative. But no matter what, we'll have each other's backs. Mrs. Hastings helped me apply for a scholarship, one created for survivors of abuse who want to pursue advocacy. I wrote about the basement. I wrote about the silence. I wrote about how a single camera, a single message, and a single friend saved my life. I got the scholarship. And then something unexpected happened. My story reached a nonprofit that produced online content around trauma recovery. They asked if I'd be willing to film a short video about resilience, about finding light in the dark. It would be part of a digital resource for teens navigating family abuse. I was nervous, but I said yes. We filmed in a small studio downtown, minimal set, just me, a chair, and a lens. I didn't read a script. I told the truth. I was locked in a basement by the people who were supposed to protect me. I began looking directly at the camera, and for a long time, I believed I had to stay quiet to stay safe. But silence never saved me. What saved me was my voice. What saved me was being believed. I ended the video with the words that had become my mantra. Your story matters, even when it's messy, even when it's painful. Especially then. When the video went live, the response was staggering. Messages poured in from teens in every state. Some thanked me, some asked for help. Some just said, "I feel seen." And that was enough. That's all I ever wanted, to turn pain into purpose, to make sure no one else had to sit alone in the dark, thinking they were the only one. I don't know where life will take me next. Maybe I'll become a photojournalist. Maybe I'll write a memoir. Maybe I'll lead workshops in schools, helping kids recognize warning signs before they become survival stories. What I do know is this: I will never again shrink myself to fit someone else's expectations. I will never again apologize for wanting more. And I will never, ever forget that day. I walked up the basement stairs and chose myself over fear. My father once told me I needed to be fixed. He was wrong. I wasn't broken. I was buried. And now I've risen. What I learned from those 3 days and the long journey afterward is this: survival is not weakness. It's courage in its rawest form. The world often expects us to endure quietly, to forgive quickly, to bounce back like nothing happened. But true healing doesn't follow anyone else's timeline, and it doesn't come from pretending the pain wasn't real. I learned that love without respect is not love. That control dressed as care is still control. That silence, even when well-intentioned, allows harm to thrive. But I also learned that light finds a way through even the thickest dark. Whether it's through a friend who believes you, a teacher who gives you space to speak, or a stranger who says me too, healing begins when your voice is heard. Most importantly, I learned that I am not what was done to me. I am what I choose to do next. I am the stories I tell, the people I help, the truths I stand up for. And I get to decide where my story goes. From here, not my past, not my fear, and certainly not the people who tried to keep me small. If you're watching this and trapped in a home that feels more like a prison than a sanctuary, know this: what's happening to you is not normal, and you are not alone. Abuse doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it sounds like manipulation, looks like isolation, and hides behind the mask of discipline. Reach out. Even if it's just a message to a friend, a trusted teacher, a counselor. Document what you can. Save messages. Write things down. Every sliver of truth matters. And if you're someone who suspects a child is in danger, don't stay silent. Be the person who checks in. Be the Jasmine in someone's story. One message, one knock, one moment of belief can be the thing that sets someone free. Your voice can be the light someone else is praying for.